He put the rope from the climbing walls around his neck, and, you know, because he still had logic, and he thought then if he just threw himself out of the chair, then that's the same as if you stand on a stool and then kick the stool away.
In the building I was in, they'd been building this mountaineering centre where there was ropes hanging from the ceiling. The one I'd happened to have tied my neck round when I leapt from the wheelchair sort of thing was the one that gave way from the ceiling, and this huge great big metal plate come flying down and had a huge dent into the floor. And ironically, I was so cross that I could have been killed by this eyelet falling out the ceiling. Looking back at it now, yes, I do smile and think, you know, but my anger was, God, I could have been killed by that.
It was a failed attempt, but, you know, he had the rope burned round his neck. I did get worried that he would try and hang himself at home.
Alan was discharged from the Royal Navy in 1994, declared physically unfit for naval service. But it was a daily torment for Sandra, living as a carer for a husband that was so changed.
The frontal lobes of the brain essentially is the area of the brain you'd say was you. So it's involved in your ability to have empathy with other people, to think about how they might be feeling.
I didn't like her at all, and gosh, you know, in those early days she was alone, because you know, when there were days she was crying in the sitting room and I could be sat right by her, I didn't feel like putting an arm around her or offering her support, because just there wasn't anything there.
It was just, I just remember it being really lonely. I was just always so angry. I was so angry that he couldn't see just what he was putting the rest of the family through. He couldn't see, you know, I wanted him to be a normal person that could actually sit down and I could just say, can you not see what you're doing to the family?
It's just sad that he's had to give up the life in the Navy and for him ending up as he is. He's not the same person that's come home that went. He really isn't.
7 years after the accident, Alan was a shell of his former self. He was barely able to speak and suffered psychological and physical disabilities. The couple's former life and happiness were long gone.
Twice I went to see solicitors to find out about, you know, divorce, what would happen with the children, because I didn't want people to think I was just deserting somebody that needed me at that time.
So we'd just argue and he'd frustrate me and I'd frustrate him. So it would just be constant arguing and bickering, and then of course Mum would get cross and it would just all sort of get out of hand and not be particularly nice.
I didn't love the person that I was living with, but I must have still loved the person that I thought might still be there somewhere.
But destiny was about to change their lives. By pure chance, Sandra spotted an article in a local paper about a charity, Canine Partners, that provides assistance dogs for the disabled.
Let's go.
Canine Partners really aims to transform people's lives. Our mission really is to give people independence, so to try and reduce dependence on other people.
Specifically trained to provide physical and emotional support, these dogs can change people's lives. From 6 weeks old, puppies are tested to see if they have a suitable disposition.
No, she's lovely. She's lovely. Very waggy-tailed, happy, wants to pick things up. You can see that she's quite a bright spark as well. It's just something about dogs that gets you every time, because they can unlock something that no person's been able to unlock. You know, the dog's done it because it's trusting and it's just giving. They're so bright, they're intuitive, they know, you know, what you're thinking before you think it yourself half the time.
For the first year of their lives, the puppies are then placed with puppy parents. It was at one of these training sessions that the fateful meeting would occur.
We first met Endel when I went up to a puppy class and Alan didn't go to daycare that day, his bus didn't come. So he came up to the training centre and as ever, Alan just wanted to sit in a corner and not really be bothered with anything.
Having spent the last 7 years in hospitals and rehab, Alan had stopped engaging with everyone and disconnected himself from the rest of the world.
Endel would just literally made a beeline really for this chap in a wheelchair and tried to give him things, pick things up, put them on his lap, and I think, you know, Endel just could sense the person in the room that probably needed him, you know, needed him most at the time.
I don't remember the first time I saw Endel because at the time I was probably at my worst socially out in public. I didn't want to talk to people, so I was in my insular world. I do know that I've been told I went to the training centre a couple of times and, you know, looked at the dogs and things like that. But I don't remember those early days with Endel, though I do remember the day we picked Endel up very clearly.
Little did Sandra know what a profound effect the young Labrador would have.
At first, when Alan took Endel, he actually didn't want to get too attached to Endel because he didn't know if Endel was actually going to be staying with us. And I think that was probably the first time I saw that there was an emotion there, because he said when we questioned him, you know, because he didn't seem to look as if he was enjoying having Endel, he said, well, I don't want to get attached because, I don't want to love him too much and then he doesn't stay. So that was a big step really about him having feelings.
But Alan's battles weren't just psychological. He was also struggling to accept his impaired mobility.
I had to admit my disability to get Endel, but up until then I was always fighting it, denying it. But actually when I applied for Endel, that was really it. That was saying, I am disabled, you know, I can't have an assistance dog if I wasn't disabled. No one could just come in. And actually, it was a very important moment.
It was only the beginning of the incredible role Endel would play in Alan's life. And no one could have predicted just how celebrated Endel would eventually become.
I don't think there's been a more famous dog or a more well-loved dog. He's just the most famous dog in the world.
In 1998, Sandra Parton was living a nightmare. Her husband Alan had suffered a severe head injury while serving in the Gulf. Much of his memory was destroyed, and he had no recollection of his wife and family.
As far as I was concerned, he'd walked out the door one day, my husband, and the next time he'd come back in the house, he wasn't.
But there was a glimmer of hope. A yellow Labrador had come into their lives and was having an impact that no one could have imagined.
He was a gentle giant. He could be clumsy, and I mean, a wag of the otter-like tail, and you could see a coffee cup, you know, do 100 yards quite happily. And you know, when he crashed through things, when he opened doors and things, he did it with such gusto. But I mean, you know, you learnt and you adapted the house to having this big, clumsy. I mean, he was a 12-month-old Labrador.
At the point where Alan started to look after Endel, he still didn't really have any speech. It was very sort of just single words, very much barking out words, you know, no real control over what he said. And Endel had to learn to be really patient.
But Endel and I learned to sign language, like that was razor, that was coat, that, you know, that was hat. And though I couldn't communicate very well with my family, Endel was on the ball.
Quite quickly, really, his speech improved because he really had to say, just think about what he was saying.
And improved speech meant improved communication all round.
Here you go, Sandra. I mean, Endel started doing things that made me laugh. You know, if I said, right, I'm going to leave him in the house and I would go out, the little blighter would have opened the kitchen door, got his coat and his lead, gone through the garden gate and would be out the front, and I was backing out the house. He would be there with everything.
Alan's mood was better, so was my mood was better, and the children's mood was better.
Endel's helped him a lot more than what he even realises. And his relationship with Zoe and his son, I think that's really improved.
You know, the laughter I was having with Endel was sort of infectious. Everyone relaxed more in the house, and there wasn't this awful tension. You know, is Dad going to be in a good mood today? Is Dad going to be miserable today?
We realised that Alan was actually laughing with the children when the children were laughing at the dog. And first time I think it happened, it was almost the children were quite shocked that they weren't being told to be quiet. And, you know, Dad was laughing first instead of being the one to say, you know, be quiet.
The last 7 years had taken its toll on all the family, especially Zoe, who'd taken the brunt of Alan's dark moods.
And obviously when Endel came along, it gave him a reason to, you know, to show us maybe what Endel had done. If he'd learnt something new, he'd be able to show us what Endel learnt, and that was sort of how we started to sort of rebuild up our relationships.
It was quite nice being in the house. We were enjoying the company of each other, and Alan had his own things he had to do, feed the dog, groom the dog, take the dog for exercise. And it just meant that I felt much freer to go out, maybe with the children. The children felt they could have friends round. So it was just like, you know, much lighter atmosphere all round.
We had like a reason to live, and there was a reason to go out.
Thank you ever so much.
There was a reason to do things, and people would talk to him because he had the dog that could do something special.
Come on then, Endel. Good boy. Good boy.
He has become a celebrity in our area, and as such, everyone knows him immediately and just wants to say hello because he's very, very special.
Hello, Endel.
Hello there.
Aren't you lovely? Hey, you're an amazing boy. There's not one single person who lives hereabout who doesn't know Endel and Alan.
And the children love him especially.
Bye-bye.
Oh, he says hello, you? That's my favourite place to be tickled.
Endel's celebrity status was growing. Soon he was hitting the headlines.
It was about in 1999, in September, we got a letter to say that Endel had been selected to be one of the hunks of the month in the Dogs Today Millennium Calendar. And we were invited to come here for our 1 hour slot to have Endel photographed. Okay.
And when Endel was packed using a cash point for Alan, the press got even more obsessed with the yellow lab.
I'd heard of a dog that was using the cash point, but I didn't really believe the story. But it was enough to make us look further. And the more we looked at the story, the more exciting we got.
Here you go.
Can you look up? That's good.
That's it.
Oh. We made Alan and Endel Dog of the Millennium for our 2000 calendar. And we did the shoot at this photo studio. And it was the first time I'd met Alan. And we had a few journalists turn up. A dog calendar doesn't sound the most exciting story in the world, but the couple of journalists that did turn up, when they heard Alan's story for the first time, I saw really hard-bitten journalists actually crying. And at that point, they were saying, well, actually, this is such a big story that they were phoning up friends on rival newspapers to say, really, you need to get down to Slough. This is such a story.
When we went outside the studios here, there was the world's press, and it was just amazing. Banks of photographers all wanting to take pictures of Endel, going to the cash point machine, doing shopping. Where we'd lived in quite a quiet lifestyle, we were suddenly thrown into the world's media.
The next day, it was in every newspaper. From that day onwards, everything was pivotal. Everything changed.
Alan, a long time ago, Bonnie, the Blue Peter dog, was awarded a gold Blue Peter badge. She was the only dog ever to get one, but we'd like to give Endel our programme's highest award for all of his fantastic efforts.
Can I say I am absolutely honoured.
How long have you two been together?
2 years now. That's it.
Has it changed your life totally?
He's saved my life. I came back from the Gulf War. I couldn't recall being married. I couldn't recall the birth of my children.
Oh, I'm so moved. I don't know what to say. That is amazing.
And the awards just kept coming.
Was voted Dog of the Millennium. He then won the Pro Dog Gold Award for Dog of the Year. He's got a Golden Donio Award. He's also won a Lifetime Achievement Award, PDSA Gold Medal, Gold Blue Peter Badge. You know, he has been now recognised as the most highly decorated and awarded dog in the world, which is quite a lovely, you know, it feels great to me, you know, that he's recognised for what he has done, not just by me, but by the world, you know, that Endel is Endel Dog of the Millennium.
Endel healed Alan in a way that no psychologist could ever do, and made him whole.